there, Christina Wolfram here with Porky Pastures, and I am so glad that you've joined us today where we're going to talk about things that I wish I knew before I got a dairy cow. And we're live today in the group Natural Homesteaders of Southern Maryland. If you know of anybody, you're obviously in the group. You wouldn't be seeing this video as we're live right now. But if you know anybody that you think might be interested in the group and is in Southern Maryland, I would love it if you would share it with them. We're small right now, but I'd love to grow it and have a active community of people talking about natural homesteading right here in Southern Maryland. So today, like I said, we're going to talk about things I wish I knew before I got a dairy cow. So first, I will introduce you to my sweet Madeline. And this is a bit of a tough video for me because sweet Madeline is no longer with us. And it's because of her that I know the things today that we're going to talk about. Both good and bad. A lot of good came from having her, but we did unfortunately learn a lot of very, very hard lessons. And that is why I want to share with you today, because having a dairy cow is very, very different than having any other cow. And we joined all the groups, dairy cow groups on Facebook, and we thought we were ready and we knew, and we weren't really ready, but a good opportunity came up and we took it. And, it's a double-edged sword, because had we known what we know today, we probably wouldn't have had sweet Madeline. And having her taught us so much. It's prevented us from making, hopefully, this mistake ever again in the future. Not mistake, but you'll know what I mean shortly. But it also gave us an amazing opportunity to have all of the good things that happen with a dairy cow. So we definitely don't regret it, but it was a difficult ending to the experience, and I'm hoping to share some of those things with you today, so that if you're thinking about adding a dairy cow to your farm or your homestead, you can do so with maybe a little bit of the information that we didn't have. If at any point you have a question, put it into the comments and I will answer it as they come in. And then if you have any questions that are not related to what I'm talking about right now, but still farming or homesteading, gardening, livestock, save it for the end, and we can do a Q&A if anybody has questions about anything else. Gardening, preserving, any of those things. So Madeline was a brown Swiss. Brown Swiss is a very large breed of dairy cow. They can produce up to 10 gallons a day of milk. So a big, high production, huge cow, wonderful personality, very sweet, pretty docile. She did have some spunk, typically where food is involved. So you'll see some pictures of that in just a minute. So first, kind of like the basic things that not everybody thinks about when you get a dairy cow. It sounds like, oh, fun, I'm just going to milk and then I'll have a fridge full of butter and cheese and everything will be wonderful. So it takes a lot of time to have a dairy cow. When you're factoring in, okay, maybe milking takes 30 to 40 minutes, actually sitting there and milking, but you're going out and getting the cow, you're bringing her into the barn, if you're feeding or giving hay or whatever, you're doing that, you're locking her up, you're cleaning her. There's a whole process for cleaning the udder, making sure that it's not going to contaminate the milk. One thing I learned about dairy cows, and this is kind of just like the basic easy stuff, we're going to get to the harder stuff towards the end. Your dairy cow, you could be in a drought of 100 degrees with no rain for 6 months. She will dig a well in the yard just so that she can lay in poop and mud right before you milk her. It's going to happen every single day. And she'll find a way to create mud just so that you'll have to clean it before you milk her every day somehow. So you have to account for that time. Brushing, if it's warm enough to hose her off, You're gonna have some good like horse brushes and just be ready for it because it's gonna happen, especially if you're out there and you have a grass-fed cow that, isn't in a barn all day. So you have the time for milking, and then you have aftercare. You're cleaning her again. Some people do like an iodine dip and all that kind of stuff. You might be doing some extra brushing. You are going to check them over for issues. You always are checking your dairy cow for, hoof issues and udder issues. And there's so many things that can happen with a dairy cow that we'll get into more. You're always kind of giving that cow a once over to make sure that nothing is wrong. And I'm just going to pop it up here. Give me 1 second. I meant to do this before so that I can just make sure that everything is working from my phone. And again, if you have any questions about the things that I'm saying, please, please, please drop it in the comments. And I'm pulling it up on my phone too so that I can see it, because I don't always know with this system if it's coming through. So make sure you put your questions in the comments. So we're talking about checking for issues, and then you have to, strain and process the milk. You can't just take it from the bucket and put it in the refrigerator. You have to strain it and make sure it's clean, put it away, make sure it gets cooled quickly. Then you have to clean all of the equipment. So your 30-minute milk time is really like an hour, hour and a half, morning and night if you're milking twice a day, or just morning or just night if you're doing once a day milking. So it is a very time-consuming thing to take on. Then, it takes time to turn that milk into other things. If you're just going to drink the milk, then wonderful, it's right there for you. But cows produce a lot of milk, so you're probably going to want to turn it into cheese and butter, and then use the whey and use the buttermilk for all different things so that you don't waste it. All of those things take a lot of time. They're all wonderful things, and it's great to be able to do it. And we love being able to make our own, butter and cheese and all those things. But you definitely have to set aside fairly significant blocks of time to do that. And then, something else that you want to consider is milk storage. That doesn't really go under the time thing, but like I said, cows can do anything from, 1 gallon on a lower producing cow up to 10 gallons a day. So you have to have a place to store that. And typically you want a separate refrigerator because it's going to fill up very, very quickly. Okay, so where will you milk? You see pictures online of people milking in these beautiful stanchions, but we found that just really wasn't always realistic. It depended where, we do rotational grazing, so it really depends on where she was. If she happened to be in the field that was attached to the little barn where I had things set up, great. We would milk her there, and that was very easy. But, a lot of times we had her in an electric fence in the front yard because that's really good grass. And during those times, I would just take a little stool and sit, give her some hay and her feed, and just milk her right there wherever she was, which is great too. So you just want to kind of consider that. Some cows are better for just like milking in the field than others. Some move around too much, some kick, some cows require restraints that you don't get kicked. Some cows require like a can't kick bar, I think is what it's called, that goes over their hip bones so that they can't kick you. So, if you're having to lug out all those things, the field might not be the best option for you, and it might be worth the time to bring them into your milking stanchion. You also want to consider that milking in the middle of the field is not going to be easy in bad weather. You're going to want some place where you can get out of the elements. It doesn't necessarily have to be completely enclosed, but at least somewhere where you can get under some cover. You don't want like mud and dirt and rain going into your milk bucket. Okay, so dairy cows eat a lot. Even your grass-fed dairy cows eat a lot. If you have a cow that you're giving grain, and some of your higher production cows really can't survive on just grass. The ability to be grass-fed has been bred out of them for commercial high production qualities. So most Holsteins and Brown Swiss, you still have lines that can and do, but for the most part, a lot of these high production lines just cannot maintain their condition. They get skinny very, very quickly, like sickly skinny very, very quickly if they don't have high levels of grain. So for those breeds that you're graining, they're taking 10 plus pounds a day. So that gets really, really expensive. And that's on top of, some of them eat up to a whole square bale of hay per day. And on top of all the grass, I think it's like 70 to 90 pounds of total food. So that's including hay and grass a day that the average high production dairy cow eats. So you really have to take that into account. Do you have enough grass? Do you have enough hay? How much is the hay? Do you have a good source for, chemical-free hay? Do you have access to high quality grain that's not going to, fill your milk with chemicals? You do have some breeds and some lines within breeds that can sustain on grass only, which is wonderful. A lot, even grass only, you pretty much have to supplement with hay unless you just have an overabundance of grass. And so, we still have winter when grass isn't really growing. So you definitely want to consider hay. Alfalfa is good. We always give a little bit of alfalfa to our cows, mostly just to get them their herbal supplements, but alfalfa can be used with dairy cows too. There's some conflicting opinions about giving it to them in the early stages of lactation. Some people say that it inhibits their ability to absorb calcium, and a lack of calcium in dairy cows can lead to milk fever and edema and a few other conditions. But that is mostly, not completely, but mostly isolated to your really high production breeds, which are much more fragile and susceptible to complications and health issues. So the next thing to consider is breeding. How are you going to reproduce? A cow does not have milk if it doesn't have a baby, typically once a year. Some breeds can continue being milked and not drop off completely or dry up on their own. More than a year. Some breeds do better long term, but typically your dairy cow needs to have a baby every year to continue being milked. So you have to consider, will you have a bull? Some breeds of bulls are really, really mean, like Jersey bull is known for being incredibly mean and very dangerous. But then you have Dexters where they're like little puppy dogs. And, we have a Dexter bull. We walk right by him with our kids. I mean, of course, we're careful. We're very careful because you never know, and you can never trust an animal, especially of that size, and a bull. But I think he's more scared of us. I think he's more scared of my 3-year-old than we are of him. But of course, you always have to be careful. So if you're not going to have a bull, do you have a resource for AI in our area? I don't know of anybody that can AI. I don't know of any vets that do it. There could be somebody. And actually, if you guys know of anybody that does AI, I would love to know about it. So if you could message me or drop me in the comments. I've had several questions lately about who can AI, and haven't come up with like a solid source. I have a couple possibilities, but no solid source so far. So if you know of anybody, please let me know. But in other areas, it's an easy thing to do. Like out in Virginia, all the vets almost do it because it's just a normal thing to do out there. And they have so many more cow farms. So you just want to have a plan for that. People say, oh, you can rent a bull or you can borrow a bull. I mean, to each his own. I would never do that because we are so careful with biosecurity, and that is how things transmit, is by, cross-contamination. Every animal that comes on our farm, we're very careful about where they come from. They're always quarantined for 30 to 60 days, depending on where it came from and the situation. So it would never make sense for us to rent a bull or borrow a bull, and we would never take our animal to somebody else's farm for the same reason. So if you hear somebody say that, maybe, I guess, but It's just like buying auction animals. I would never, do that. So I wouldn't borrow an animal from somebody either. So, I mean, there could be a situation where that might work for you, but I would just be very careful, do your research, and make sure you focus on biosecurity and come up with a good plan to be careful if you're going to do that. It only takes one mistake to really mess things up. Okay, so more things about dairy cows. They have really big feelings. They're emotional animals, and I would imagine that is just because they are lactating. They have a lot of hormones. I mean, they just have attitudes. They want what they want. They want it right now, and they're willing to work for it. You can see that was my sweet Madeline. She spilled a little bit of grain, and she was not going to let it go to waste. She would also, if I had, so right behind where her butt is right there, I had a chain that would close that so that she wouldn't just walk into it when it wasn't time. And if she thought that there was food right there by that bucket, she would get on her knees like this, and even on her back legs, like heels, and she would scoot under. I mean, mind you, she was probably like a 1,300-pound cow or something like that. She was really big. And that was while she was on the skinny side. So she would scooch under that like a puppy and get what she wanted. And it really didn't matter what she took out or who was in her way. And I said this, I was talking to a friend not long ago, and I said this, and, I thought about it afterwards, and I was like, that is really true. So, like, they can be lovable and they act like they love you, but I don't really think that they do. I think that literally they only think about food. And if you're the one with the food, then they love you. And that's it. Because I think that is the only thing that they ever think about. Okay. So this is where we get into kind of the harder topics. And the first thing I'll say is that the breed matters, because you have kind of two groups of cows that are dairy cows. You have high production, like the modern dairy breeds that have really had most of their hardy qualities bred out of them in exchange for high production. So, most cows are on large scale or in large scale dairy production facilities, and they don't have access to a lot of grass. They're in tight quarters. They're fed a lot of grain. Their only purpose is walking in there, being milked twice a day. And the only thing that matters is how much they produce. And if they don't produce a certain amount for a certain number of days, they're usually cut. And so hardiness and all these things, they don't really care. They're medicated, they're vaccinated, they're, given antibiotics. And the ability to survive in difficult conditions and have a good immune system, those things are unfortunately bred out of a lot of these high production breeds. Now, with that said, there are lines within those breeds that have not been changed so significantly. So, for instance, I know of several grass only or almost completely grass only Jersey farms. They are out there. And if you are set on a Jersey and want to know who those people are, let me know, and I can definitely let you know. Brown Swiss is a tough one because they are so big. They require a lot of food. Same with Holstein and Guernseys. They're just so big. I'm sure there are people out there doing it, grass and hay only. I don't know of any. Most of the people that I know with these large breeds are doing the, 10 pounds plus a day of grain and basically unlimited hay, and maybe most of them are on grass too. But those modern high production dairy breeds, be careful though, because they are very fragile. They are susceptible to a lot of these things because their body is pouring so much energy into producing milk. I mentioned before milk fever, edema. There's just a huge list of things that go wrong with these big dairy cows. Not to say not to get them. I just think it's important to know what you're getting into and to educate yourself on how to prevent and handle these issues, because it seems like they're very likely to come up with those breeds. So some alternatives are the more dual purpose meaning raised for milk and meat. They're heritage breeds, so they're just less modified and changed, altered for high production. So you're not going to get as much milk with these breeds, but you might have a much healthier, easier to care for animal. So my favorite example of that is the Dexter. We have Dexters. I don't milk my Dexters, so I can't speak to their milk, but we do have them. They're incredibly hardy. They literally get fat on air. They don't take any grain, and they're great mothers, easy births. We just go out in the field and there's a baby. There are things that, if you're thinking about getting into Dexters, that you should know. There are some genetic mutations that are in some of the lines. You want to be careful of, not getting into that. We've made that mistake too and learned the hard way. But overall, the Dexter is an amazing breed, and I highly recommend them. They are the perfect breed for a small farm, a homestead, if you're just wanting to provide milk and meat for yourself and, maybe a few friends and family. They're great for that. They're a smaller breed. They're about half the height, almost, not quite, but about half the height. Like their backs come to my waist versus Madeline, whose back was like up here at my head. So they're excellent. Others are Dutch Beltage, Shorthorns. There's several dual purpose heritage breeds that are like this. I think the consensus is that the hardiest is probably the Dexter. And they have great meat, and they can still produce, like 2 to 3.5. I've seen some people say 5 gallons, but I think 3 is probably the average per day for the Dexter. So your breed definitely matters. You don't want to just grab the first thing that comes along like we did. So health. With the dairy cow, mastitis is always one that can pop up. So you want to make sure that your processes and procedures are really good, so that there's no contamination and there's no bacteria getting into their udder during the milking process. It's hard because, like I said, they do lay and poop right before you milk every single day. So you have to just make sure you're cleaning well and cleaning the right way, and identifying the mastitis as quickly as possible if it does pop up, so that you can kind of nip it in the bud before it becomes an issue. So there's only one strand of mastitis that I know that that I am told is incurable. So for the most part, mastitis is treatable, and it's just kind of a thing that if it pops up, you handle it and move on. These others can be a little trickier. So let me go back to our Madeline. We only were familiar with Hones when we got her, or that was the one that, like, when we were researching, that kept popping up. So we drew blood on her ourselves and sent it off for testing when we were considering her, and it came back negative. So we knew she was a little bit underconditioned, but we figured let's get her out on good grass and good hay. And we were graining her because she was so big and she was underweight. So we just made that decision. And we were milking her and things were going great, but she just wasn't gaining weight the way we had hoped. And she had really loose stool, which everybody kind of said that was normal for a dairy cow. But with our Dexters, they have like a really nice firm poop. And it was just very different from what we were used to. And we were milking her and we were drinking her milk. We were making butter. But a few months went by and she gained a little bit, but not the way we felt she should be. But then we also started getting some clumps in her milk. And we still really weren't thinking that something might be wrong, but I was thinking mastitis. And so I said, well, I was going to send in a sample of the milk and figure out what type of mastitis it was, because if you know what type it is, what strand, it makes it a little bit easier to treat, especially when you're treating it naturally and not with modern medication. So usually mastitis is caused by like an imbalance in something or deficiency or contamination of some sort that can be typically fixed holistically and naturally. So we were running it, but I figured while I'm sending in the sample, we use Central Star. They're a big lab, and there's one in Michigan and one in Wisconsin. There's a whole bunch of stuff that you can run just with the milk sample. So I just checked all the boxes because I figured, why not? We're taking the time to send the sample in and, put an ice pack and do all the things. We might as well just run full panel and everything. And so the first few things that came back were negative. She came back for a couple of like easy to fix mastitis conditions. And the last one that came through was positive. And so this third one down was bovine leukosis virus. And so she was positive for them. And unfortunately, that's not usually one that you can fix. And so we had to dry her up immediately. And after a lot of research and a lot of discussion and a lot of evaluating her future and the quality of life that she was kind of leading into, we made the decision that it was best to put her down. And, with a dairy cow, they become part of your family. Your head is resting on them while you milk twice a day, every day, and you're together. And, it's kind of special to have a dairy cow. And so losing her is very, very hard. And so that's one reason why I'm doing this video, because hopefully it can, maybe save somebody else from going through that. So she was positive. These other things she was all negative for. And I think it was, she was negative for heartache. She was negative for BVD, which is it's a viral diarrhea that apparently never goes away either. I think it's a little bit less common. I'm going to do a separate video that kind of goes into these viruses a little bit more, because I learned things that are just crazy. Quick fact is that 40% or more of beef herds have BLV, and it's running rampant, but nobody cares. And now there's studies coming back that so basically all the meat that you eat at the grocery store could have all of these things, but they don't really test beef cows for it because they figure, who cares? No, I don't know. So now there's some studies coming out that link some of these things to different cancers in humans. But when you look it up without digging further, everything says, oh, no link to cancer, no link to this. But if you look at some of the newer studies that you have to dig a little bit for, they're finding BLV in breast tissue, cancer breast tissue and crazy things. So there's no definitive link yet, but it's definitely possible. So, that was one of the things that led to that decision. And, there's a difference too, which I won't get into too much, but there's a big difference between having the antibody, which means it's just kind of underlying somewhere in you, but you're not actively infected. And so she didn't have mucus. She didn't have horrible symptoms, but she was definitely losing weight. And, she had the loose stool. So we don't really think she had active infecting everybody type of infection. And everybody else on the farm tested negative, and she wasn't exposed. She was actually completely isolated. She was never with the other cows out in the field. So that was good. But so I don't think she was actively shedding and infecting, but she definitely had it in her system somewhere. And I was about to say something. Yeah. So everybody, tested negative. It is one of the more difficult ones to transmit. So that was a good thing. They say that it really only transmits through blood, and it can transmit through colostrum. So typically it's spread if you share a needle for drawing blood or giving medicine, or if you have a vet that's using the same glove to evaluate internally or take blood or whatever, and it's cross-contaminating. So that's typically how it spreads. But I guess there are other ways too that it could have, whereas heartache can spread much easier. It's a very contagious thing. So we were fortunate that at least the thing that she came up with was not something that caused big problems on our farm. We're very, very careful. We quarantine. She was always separate just because she was the dairy cow. So, she wasn't with the rest of the herd. She was kind of like on the other side of the farm. So I'm sure that helped. But it would definitely have been better to test beforehand and avoided the situation completely. I mean, I say that, but I don't regret the time that I had with her. I learned how to, do so many things. So it was definitely not a wasted experience. And here I am to hopefully prevent somebody else from going through it. So it definitely happened for a reason. So quickly, the testing, and I don't need to go into this in big detail. If you have a cow and you're interested and you have specific questions, you can always send me a message, but just kind of an overview. There are different types of testing. There's Elisa, I don't know how they say it. ELISA, I think I heard somebody say, or a PCR. So a PCR detects active infection, like you're sick, you're coughing, you're sneezing, and you're infecting everybody around you. ELISA tests for the antibodies. So you have it somewhere in your system and it could flare up at some point in your life. So I always recommend the ELISA because it's letting you know if it's there. You can have an animal that tests negative on PCR, but that still is a carrier because they have the antibodies, meaning they were exposed at some time. So there's a big difference if you have a very sick a lot of times you want to start with an ELISA test to see if they have the antibodies. If it's a positive, you might want to do a PCR to see if there's an active infection. Some of these tests, I think actually Honey's is the only one that I know of that you can test with a fecal. All of the ones that I've talked about, you can test through, I believe, blood. I know all the ones that I test for you can do with blood. And a lot of them you can do with milk. Just about all of them you can do through milk. You can have your vet do these. It can be kind of expensive. We just do it ourselves. So I get the vials. I just send or get the supplies from Central Star. They're very inexpensive, like $1 or something a tube. And then you get the right ones. So I'm always worried that I'm going to get the wrong thing. But you get the right ones when you do it that way. And we just draw the blood. The first time was kind of hard, especially on the beef cows because we tested like everybody. The beef cows were harder because they're not like tame, like not halter broke. But once you kind of figure out how to get it in, how to get the needle in right, it's pretty easy. So we pull all of our own blood and then mail it off to Central Star. And so it's way cheaper. The vet, if you ran a full panel of all of those things, it would be many hundreds of dollars, probably $300 to $500. But we do it for less than $100 to run a full panel on an animal. Like that would be every test and more. I mean, I think I spent less than $100 and actually did it on multiple animals. So if you can learn to do it yourself, that's the best. That's wonderful. But a vet can do it too if you're not comfortable with that. So let's see, I think, yeah, that was my last slide. So I saved all that hard stuff for the end. Definitely the health things. I'm going to go back to, let's see. So we went over our situation with Madeline and what happened. We're grateful for her. We're grateful for her life and her time with us. It was scary and it was sad. And but we learned so much. We learned just so much information that's going to help us and help other people in the future that, it wasn't a bad thing that it happened. It was sad. It was hard, but it happened for a reason. And I hope that you all can learn something from it and that this video has helped you if you're thinking about getting a dairy cow. This video will be posted to, to the group. So you can go back and rewind at any time. Yeah, Raina, per animal. So if you're going through a vet, you're going to have the vet visit fee, which would cover any of the animals that you're going to be testing. So you have like one visit fee for them to come out. And then, yeah, you're going to pay hundreds of dollars per animal because for the vet to draw it. So like, for instance, there's a test that's like $6 to run if I send it to Central Star. Well, that same test, the vet is going to upcharge that to about $20 or $30. And then they're going to charge for pulling the blood. They're going to charge you for coming and pulling the blood on top of the vet visit. So then you're talking about, 5 or 6 tests. So then you're at $100+ for those 5 or 6 tests per test, plus to draw the blood, plus the vet visit. So I had a vet one time do, I think it was 2 tests, and it was almost $400 to come, pull the blood, run the tests, and mail them off and everything. And I did, I think it was 3, the one I'm going to quote was, I think 3 animals that I did myself and ran everything but mastitis, because the animals that I was running that I'm talking about right now, the ones that were closest to Madeline's pen that I was running just to be sure, that were all negative. There were 3 animals. I did it myself. So the supplies were less than $10, and then the shipping was like $10, and it was maybe $60 to run all the tests on all 3 animals. So yeah, less than $100 for me to run the tests on all 3 animals, full panel, everything, versus almost $400 for 2 tests on 1 animal with a vet. So definitely pays to learn how to do it yourself. So are there any other questions about dairy cows? And if not, do you have any other questions at all regarding farming or livestock or homesteading or preserving or any of the things? We are planning on scheduling another backyard pig workshop. The last one went really, really well. I'm not really sure exactly when it's going to be. So if anybody has like a day that would work best for them, send me a message. I'm thinking later on a Saturday, but the closer we get to summer, I know that gets tough for people. I was thinking maybe a weekday evening, but then I don't know if that would be tough with people, soccer and lacrosse and all the things right now. So if you have any opinion on that, send me a message. But we're definitely going to be scheduling one at some point in the fairly near future. And then also thinking about doing a bread, cheese, and butter class. So if anybody is interested in that, it will probably be early June, because that's when I'm going to have access to that building here on the farm. And so if you're interested in that, send me a message. And we have some animals that are available for sale. It's part of our business. We breed and sell certain animals at certain times. So if you're interested in expanding your livestock collection, visit us at porkypastures.com. You can see what we have. It's not totally up to date, but you can get a pretty good idea, and always send me a message if there's something that you're looking for, because there's a good chance we have it. We have, for those of you that don't know, we raise Dexters. We're kind of phasing out of them a little bit because we need bigger breeds for meat. We're keeping some, but because we do love them. But we have Dexters. We're trying out Angus right now. They're not my favorite, but they're delicious. So Angus, we have our main thing is Idaho pasture pigs. If you're interested in Idaho pasture pigs, let me know. We're almost sold out right now. We've got a few things available, but then we have a whole nother batch of litters that are going to be due between July and September. So we're going to have a lot more coming up, and they are sold on wait lists. You want to make sure you get on the list if you are interested, or if you just are like, what the heck is an Idaho pasture pig? Send me a message, and I would love to give you more information. So we also have Katahdin sheep. We're going to have a few of those probably available soon. We had lots of babies this spring. Some will be raised to breed, females, and we will have some for our meat program. But then we might have a few extras that are available for sale. So if you are interested in Dexter cattle, Angus cattle, because I'm going to have some of those for sale. So Dexter's, Angus, Idaho pasture pigs. I have some guinea hogs, American guinea hogs for sale. Great meat pigs, smaller than the Idaho pasture pig. But I do have a few of those left. And Katahdin sheep. I think that might be it. So let me know what you need. Let me know if you have any questions. Let me know if there's any topics that you want to hear about. I'm trying to go live 1 to 2 times a week. And so let me know what you want to hear about so I have something to talk about. All right. So thank you to everybody that watched or is going to watch the replay. And I hope you have a wonderful day, and I will see you right back here next week. Thanks.